Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for this presentation on Paterson Museum and our history. I'm Giacomo De Stefano, the director of the museum, and I'm really proud of this new series that we're starting. Not only are we offering in-person lectures, which have actually gone by the wayside due to COVID and hope to start them up soon, but we're venturing out finally into Zoom. And one of the organizations I really need to thank is the Paterson Museum Foundation, who's helping sponsor this event, and they're providing us with their Zoom account so we can bring this presentation to you. Just a couple of housekeeping pieces for us. If you do, this will be interactive after Tony's presentation. We'd ask that you hold your questions because that's when we'll do the question and answer component. For you to ask your questions, you'll notice on the bottom of the bar that it has the raised hand. We ask that you click on that, and then we will unmute you. Joining me this evening, who'll be handling the technical operations, is our curator, Heather Garside.
Hello, everyone.
And so if you don't have a microphone, no worries. You can always type your question into the chat and we will answer it that way. Okay, let's see a little introduction on Tony DeCondo. I've known Tony DeCondo for many years. He came to the Paterson Museum as a volunteer and reorganizing our Lenape collection, which is quite extensive, thousands of artifacts. And actually, all I was really hoping for Tony, help organize it, categorize it, and maybe put on a handle or two on some of our old axe heads. Well, he took it to the next level. He became one of our employees. He's established an entire Lenape presentation, which is tops in the state, truly, and it's continuing to evolve. Tony serves in the capacity as our archaeological advisor, and he's been a public school teacher. He's authored a grammar school book, published quite a few articles, and there isn't much he can't do. So at this time, I'd like to turn this over to Tony DeCondo. It's all yours, Tony.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Do I have to share a screen now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Ooh. Okay, I guess we're at the very, very beginning. This evening's talk is going to focus upon the Indian fish weir. Now, fish weirs are actually used throughout the world, but this part of the United States, the fish weir was an invaluable item that was utilized to entrap fish. And the Algonquin people that roughly go from the state of Maine down to the state of Georgia have used fish weirs to gather that vital item in their particular diet. When people think of the early American Indian, they're thinking of hunter-gatherer. But in that hunter aspect, you also have fishing. And we are in a very fortunate place here in Paterson because we have some of the finest fish weirs that are available for viewing. But the one that I'm going to focus on this evening is one of the most pristine of all of the weirs that we have here. Way back in 1913, a report of archaeological sites in New Jersey by Allison Skinner and Max Rabish made reference to 11 prehistoric fish weirs in the Passaic River. One of these, the Fairlawn Paterson fish weir, still exists. And reportedly, due to the traffic of construction equipment, over half of the other ones have been destroyed over the years. Fish weirs, fish traps, many of them built by the American Indians prior to the European settlement, were found in many places in the Passaic River and elsewhere in the region of northern New Jersey. Until recently, these structures, they were poorly documented and they were poorly understood. The Fairlawn Paterson fish weir spans the Passaic River between the city of Paterson in Passaic County through to the city of Fair Lawn in Bergen County. In New Jersey, and it is usually visible when the river is at a low level. The study of this weir, it illustrates prehistoric fishing methods that will shed some light on its use by the American Indians in this area and suggests how the weir may contribute to contemporary archaeological studies in the Northeast. The Fair Lawn Paterson fish weir, as I said previously, spans the Passaic River, approximately 600 feet north of the Fair Lawn Avenue, also known as the Fifth Avenue Bridge, between the borough of Fair Lawn and the city of Paterson. It consists of a V-shaped wall of cobbles and boulders, with its point which is oriented downstream. And there is an opening, which is a sluice, in order to permit fish to move up and downstream. The structure spans the entire width of the Passaic River between Paterson and Fair Lawn, and it's approximately 290 feet wide. The integrity of this weir is very excellent. Is due to the lack of navigation and industrial pollution on this stretch of the river. The shape of the weir is clear, although a number of the stones, especially near the central part, became dislodged and repositioned over the years. Local informants note that the structure was altered slightly around 1933, when some of the boulders were relocated to allow swimming and small watercraft to pass through. The Fair Lawn side was chosen because dye houses in Paterson were dislodging dye waste into the river. Excuse me. The entire structure is often very, very visible, especially at times of low water level. Samples of the weir's boulders and cobbles indicate that the stones used in the construction consisted primarily of glacial material obtained from the adjacent river banks. A large terrace lies adjacent to the weir on the east, on the Fair Lawn side. This terrace once contained a rich assortment of prehistoric archaeological material. But all archaeological traces were obliterated by graveling operations undertaken in the 1920s and the construction of a large industrial facility at the location. The weir is strategically located to take advantage of favorable hydraulic conditions. Water levels here are relatively shallow throughout most of the year, and the current level, well, I shouldn't say today because of the heavy rains, but the current level of, I would say about a month ago or so, was quite ideal to study the weir in its complete aspect. The current is slower in relation to points that are upstream and downstream from the weir. Now, there is a historic reference to this weir. The region in the vicinity of Fair Lawn and Paterson was known by the early Dutch as Slotterdam, or I'm sorry, Slooterdam, meaning sluice dam. A Dutch reference to the similarity of this and other nearby weirs to similar looking structures in Holland. The earliest known written references to the term Slooterdam dates to 1708, indicating that the term was probably in use in the 17th century. The name is found on numerous court documents throughout the 18th century, with many variations in spelling. This portion of Bergen County was sparsely populated by Dutch farmers through the mid-19th century. There is no mention of the use of any type of weir in the area, nor is there any indication of historic records that large-scale fishing was practiced in this area during the colonial period. The only known European use of fish weirs in this state prior to 1800 was by Mr. John Reed, a farmer from Burlington County. In 1763, he began a commercial fishing operation on the Delaware River using weirs constructed of mats and nets, which in no way resembled the stone weirs found in the Passaic River. In contrast, widespread Native American use of stone weirs was well documented at the time of European contact in this region. It is therefore likely that the Fairlawn Paterson fishware is of prehistoric origin. In 1913, Shrabish and Skinner listed, as I previously mentioned, 11 stone weirs in the Passaic River. Albert Hughes, a historian, writing 10 years later, stated that 9 of these remained and noted that the use of the river for potable water was declined at that time. The potable water was actually streams running into the Passaic River. This was due to extremely high pollution that was caused by factories. There is a weir in the vicinity of the Dundee Dam, which is approximately 3.8 miles downstream from the Fairlawn Paterson Weir. And this remains visible at times, and this specimen is in an advanced state of disintegration. Approximately 1,000 feet down from the Fairlawn Paterson fish weir is a recently discovered 3-winged weir. In other words, it has 3 walls, which is quite rare. Although colonial accounts mention the American Indians' use of weirs, there are seldom anything mentioned regarding the methods that they employed. Considering the spawning runs which took place in the rivers during the months of March and April and part of May, stone weirs would be found in those particular areas where the runs were quite heavy, and but rather for the spawning runs to conduct large quantities of fish down against the downside stream area, the use of a method which required very little labor was employed. Excuse me. River fish weirs in eastern North America were generally used for the harvesting of anadromous and catadromous fish. Anadromous fish are those which migrate upstream from the sea to spawn, such as shad, striped bass, sturgeon. And catadromous fish, primarily eels, are those which swim from lakes and rivers and streams out to sea to spawn. These runs can usually be predicted to within a few days. So basically, there were 6 methods that were described as far as the use of the weir. The most likely use of the weir was to catch the fish in the V, in the sluice area, by dragging a net through the water about a half mile above the weir and then tying the net off to the banks of the river. The fish would be trapped as the sluice would have been closed with a gate or fence, which was constructed from small branches. The trapped fish would be speared and thrown onto the bank, where they would be cleaned, cooked, and preserved. Another method involved placing a basket behind the sluice at night. Eels would swim through the sluice and be trapped in the basket, where they would be harvested in the morning. David Seisberger, an 18th century Moravian missionary, he observed that in one evening, there were over 200 eels trapped in the basket. During the migration of the salmon, there was a third method that was employed. During the migration of the salmon, shad, and striped bass, the Aborigines would close the upper part of the weir and then beginning downstream, beat the surface of the water, driving the fish towards the apex. When the fish were in between the two parts, a gate constructed out of weighted nets was closed. Then the harvest would begin. In method 4, after fashioning a net and placing it at the weir's apex, the Aborigines would commence beating the water upstream and begin walking again downstream, thereby trapping the fish between themselves and the apex. In method 5, during the spring, the shad would swim up the freshwater streams and rivers and in order to spawn, Swimming upstream, they would rise to the surface in order to pass over the weir and come within range of the Aborigines waiting with spears. And in method 6, when the shad come up the rivers, the Indians would run a dam of stones across the stream. That's the weir. Now, this is a description by George Loskiel, another Moravian missionary, back in 1794. And he goes on to describe that the fish were trapped in between these branches that were made of the trees in the immediate area, and between the branches and the nets. And they would proceed frightening the fishes into the opening left in the middle of the dam, where a number of Indians were placed on each side, standing on the legs of the angles to drive the fishes with poles, and they would make, as he's described, a hideous noise through the opening into the above-mentioned box or chest. Here they lie, the water running off through the holes in the bottom of the box, and other Indians stationed on each side of the chest take them out, kill them, and fill their canoes. By this contrivance, Loskiel stated, they sometimes catch about 1,000 shad and other fish in half a day. Well, it's certainly obvious that fish played an important role in the diet of the American Indian in this area. Fish are an attractive food source because there's little risk and effort in catching them compared to hunting deer or other animals. Fish are able to repopulate quickly. Numerous European contact accounts attest to the widespread availability and extensive exploitation of fish throughout the entire Atlantic seaboard. This was especially true in large river basins such as the Passaic. Jasper Nancrox, a Lebanese missionary, wrote of this area in 1680. He wrote that the Indians come up this river in canoes to fish. It is one of the richest fisheries that they have. The use of weirs implies at least a seasonal settlement in this vicinity of the structure. In order to construct the weir, in order to maintain it, and in order to process the catch. Aside from Skinner and Stravish's cataloging the structure, archaeologists have paid little attention to weirs in this part of the country. Efforts are being made to better document the structure's functionality and to nominate it to the National Register of Historic Places. The Fairlawn Paterson fish weir has been threatened in the past, particularly by proposed Army Corps flood control projects, which took little or no notice of the structure. But no currently proposed projects are on the books, and the threatened destruction of the weir has been placed aside. Access to the weir is unrestricted. So it's unrestricted, but it provides a potential for damage due to vandalism. The Fairlawn Paterson fish weir is important for another reasons. Insights into the structure may be used for the studies of inland weir use. In addition, the weir serves to highlight an aspect of prehistoric practices in an area of the lower Hudson drainage, where extensive urbanization has severely hindered archaeological research. And finally, the Paterson fish weir is one of the fewest visible remnants of pre-European occupation in the entire northeastern part of the United States. Willard DeYoe wrote an article in 1952 entitled Indian Fishing Stories in the Old Passaic, the story of the fish dam at Paterson. And he wrote, "May the people of our state of New Jersey soon ask that this ancient landmark, the old fish weir of pre-colonial days, be carefully preserved and suitably marked. It is worthy of a memorial park along the banks of the Passaic River, if possible, at both of its ends. Posterity is entitled to this." Now, on the Fairlawn side, there's a glacial terrace, some 60 feet in height, and it parallels the east bank of the Passaic River. And this glacial terrace runs from the Wagaraw Maple Avenue to Fairlawn Avenue Bridge. It slopes away abruptly toward the river, while its top is broad and level. Judging from the evidence of former years, this terrace was used by the Aborigines. In fact, the profusion of chips scattered over its summit points very clearly to its having been the site of many workshops where the Aboriginal anglers manufactured their tools. And there was a great variety of materials used. Just a few would be flint, quartz, chert, jasper, and argillite. In that area, Mr. Max Ravish picked up, and he wrote, many a finished artifact, notably arrow points, along with scrapers, stone hammers, and bits of pottery. Unquestionably, this ridge was once dotted by many campsites, the occupants of which most likely spent much of their time fishing in the river at the foot of the terrace. Now we can look at the constructional integrity of the weir, but there is another aspect in the study of the weir, and it's in the study of the water velocity, hydrological study. I conducted 3 experiments. The first experiment was conducted by the use of 4 upright cans, empty cans of soda filled with concrete and a PVC rod. There were 4 of them, and they were put at the beginning and at the end of the sluice where the water would run through. I devised a method of attaching flaps to both ends, and I will show you this a little bit later. And I know it sounds primitive, but what I did is that I took a tennis ball and I had a stopwatch in my hand, and I threw the tennis ball beyond the set of flaps. And as soon as that ball went through the first set of flaps, I started the timing. And when it passed through the second set of the flaps, the timing was stopped. Now, it came to the conclusion was the speed, the water speed was 2.3 feet per second. Another formula was what they used the kinetic energy, gravitational potential energy formula. And just to give you the results of that study, of that experiment, it was 2.20 feet per second. The third method I employed was a professional model. It was called the Model 2100 Swofer water meter, current velocity meter, and the average was 2.88. The cumulative average was 2.73 feet per second. Now, what type of lithic material was utilized? Well, we took samples, random samples of 17 of the lithic materials used to build the Weir. It was pebble conglomerate, arcosic sandstone, basalt, granite, diorite, and the average weight of these particular boulders and cobbles, it averaged out to 201, almost 0.7, almost 202 pounds, taking undoubtedly a tremendous amount of effort in order to place them in the proper area. Now, what I'm going to do after I have a drink of water, I'm going to go, if I do this correctly. Oh, wait. Am I doing this right? Nope, share screen. I'm sorry, Jack. Here we go. Okay, this is the fish weir on a most beautiful day. It's a beautiful day in the summer. And it's looking from the Paterson or the west side towards the Fair Lawn side. Here's an early map of the Passaic River showing the different confluences into the Passaic River itself. And here we are in this particular area. And here is Fair Lawn. And here are types of fish that were entrapped. The alewife, which is a type of mackerel, the Atlantic salmon, the Atlantic sturgeon, which could be up to 140 pounds, the bluegill sunfish, the shad. And by the way, shad runs are being renewed in the Delaware area especially. Freshwater clams, freshwater mussel, and one of their favorites, the North American eel. Then you have the pickerel and the red-breast sunfish, the rock bass, the striped bass. By the way, these are caught at the foot of the Dundee Dam in Garfield. Now here is a woven brush basket to entrap the eels. The eels would swim into the large opening and they would be entrapped and they couldn't turn around. There were others coming behind them. All right, net sinkers are simply flat pebbles which have been grooved and tied around nets which were made out of cordage, which was obtained from grass, bark. Now, this is an aerial view at 3,600 feet of the location of the Weir. This is First Avenue, Paterson, Second Avenue, Third Avenue. Third Avenue runs right into the Weir. Here we are, the Paterson side and the Fairlawn side. This shows Indian sites which have been located in and around the Passaic River area. The red ones have not been documented. The black ones have been placed within a report for the state of New Jersey. This is a CAD drawing of Weir. We used, I was working with a graduate student, engineering student from Stevens, and he used a method which is still used today, but more sophisticated because this was done in the late 90s. And what happens is that you get a configuration of the Weir. Now, I stood at different points. Wherever you see these lines, these pointed lines, that's where I held the rod in order for them to make the reading on their computer. This is a sketch of the Weir. Paterson, Fairlawn, and if you recall, I mentioned that it was an area where the stones and the cobbles were dislodged to let boats go through or little canoes and used as a swimming hole. The Paterson side was not used because the factories were dislodging a tremendous amount of chemicals. And this is the sluice. This is what we call a two-winged Weir. These are trucks, they call them buffaloes because they are land and water vehicles. And these are operated by the Passaic County River Restoration Group. This is some of the garbage that was taken from the Weir area between Maple Avenue Bridge and the Fairlawn Avenue Bridge. There are some of the tires and water tanks and shopping carts. This is on the Paterson side. And the reason why this area was used for dumping is because Route 20 runs right along this bank area. The other side, Fairlawn, does not have a road access except River Road, which is about at least 60 feet in height away from the riverbank. So Paterson has become a favorite dumping ground. There's additional. Here is a trailer truck tire. Here are two student volunteers. Each student, these are the team leaders, and they were, they had 5 other students working with them. We provided them with gloves, goggles, and boots, and they helped in taking out tires near the riverbank area. They did not go into the midsection of the river. Now, if you're looking south from the Weir, you're looking at the Fifth Avenue Bridge or the Fairlawn Avenue Bridge, which is being restored. If you look north, just about make it, that's Maple Avenue Bridge. Now, this is the method I told you previously. This is the method that I devised. I call it the tennis ball flap method. And the ball was thrown, and as soon as it hit the flap, I started timing it. And when it hit this flap, I would, of course, stop the stopwatch. I had to do it a few times in order to get it to work properly, but we finally did, and it averaged out to about 2.2 feet per second. Now, this is the river, this is the Weir at low level. This is the Weir looking north. This is the National Register of Historic Places application that was made back in 1989. Now, I won't go through this whole letter, okay? But there is what they were looking for. They were looking for tangible proof that this area was inhabited by the Aborigine. Now, we talk about tangible proof. Here in the museum, we had this collection of an arrowhead and 2 pieces of knife fragments. And where were they found? They were found opposite the foot of 3rd Avenue, Paterson in 1924. This was found opposite the foot. This was found on the Fair Lawn side. Here is another interesting lithic structure. This is the salt boulder, which is on the Fair Lawn side. The weight is over 600 pounds. But look at the concavities. I took photos, sent many of them to have them analyzed. And this was a letter from the Geohydraulic Studies Program of the United States, GS letter. And they said here that the cavities in question are shallow, generally less than 2 inches. The borings with respect to test drillings on for foundation testing are usually significantly deeper. There would be little purpose in sampling the same boulder so frequently or spacing any test drilling so close together. On the basis of the drawing and the dimensional data you forwarded to me, the cavities appear very symmetrical or perfect. Therefore, some sort of erosional or mineral solution cavities are unlikely. A man-made source appears to be logical. Now, I have a theory that this stone could have been used as a nutting stone to harvest the meat of chestnuts or large acorns, because they were at one time were quite prevalent on that side of the river. They're looking for proof. This is another letter from the New Jersey Geological Survey. This with an area. Cavities are neither geologic in nature nor the result of geological borings. They are man-made. Now here is another weir, which you could just about see it. It has 3 wings. This is the Paterson side. Here's an opening. Here is the second wing. And here is a third wing. And these are rare. This is found at the Memorial School site in Fairlawn, which is, the school is adjacent to the Passaic River. This one is under study. We studied this approximately halfway, but because of weather and other conditions, the study had to be dismissed, or not dismissed, had to be uh, put on hold. But we will get back to this. Here is a sketch of that particular weir. The Paterson side and the Fairlawn side. This, oh, okay. Well, I have it here. I might as well tell you. This young man came to my office. He was an Eagle Scout and he had to do one more project to get a badge. And he wanted to build a wigwam. And he asked me if I knew the construction method, and I told him I did. I told him exactly what he would need to do. Get at least 40 saplings, about 12 feet in height, take the bark off, clear out a circular area. And you would have to dig a hole approximately 1.5 to 2 feet deep. And there would be a team of 5, 2 on each side, bending the sapling, and you would need the 5th person to tie it. Now they worked on this. It took them about 4 days. This is what they ended up with. This is, as you can see, the frame of a wigwam. If you want to see the wigwam constructed fully, just come to the Paterson Museum, because we have one almost identical to this. Another thing that I would like to share with you is the mode of transportation that was utilized, by the Aborigine. This is a 17-foot portion of a tulip poplar log. And here it is in the museum, ready to be worked upon. I wanted to work on this outside in the traditional method of fire burning, but there were problems as far as safety, as far as if the children would be, well, once the museum was closed, this would fall on the child, it would be a disaster. So we're going to we decided to work on it inside. The length, 132.5 inches. The diameter, 25. Circumference, 73. Weight, 1,725 pounds. We had to take the bark off. This is called a spud bar. This is what we use. And we had to make cross sections in order to begin chiseling out the sections out. And then the fine work began. Fine tuning, as we would call it. And within 3 months or so, we had the completed canoe. This is on display, in the museum. Now, underneath this canoe at the museum, we have another canoe, which is made of cedar. And it was found in the Pompton Lakes area of New Jersey. And you can see the hand-carved work of that piece. It's approximately 700 to 800 years old. The one that would be underneath that you don't see here now. But if you came to the museum, you would. Now, here are just a few of the types of projectile points that we use, as far as the hunting is concerned. This was a very, very popular type of a point. But this point dates back between they call it the Archaic period, between 7,500 and 5,000 BC. 6,000 to 4,000 BC, the Genesee point, Middle Archaic. And you have the late Archaic period, 3,000 to to 1000 BC. This is extremely rare. In fact, we have a few of these, not many, about 3 or 4, in our collection of over 3,000. And we've had archaeologists from all over the Las Cruces of Pennsylvania to come in to photograph, because that was part of their study of projectile points. This is the early woodland period, 1500 to 1000 BC. And this is it. Great. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I certainly hope that this has been informative to you as far as giving you an idea as far as the ingenuity of the American Indian in this particular part of New Jersey. The museum is open up, and we have a Lenape exhibit, which you're welcome to come and visit. And we have a Lenape presentation, which is also available. I want to thank you for your evening. I want to thank you for your time. And have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, for that wonderful in-depth presentation. If anyone has any questions, we ask that you raise your hand. Tony, we ask that you stop sharing your screen.
Stop sharing my screen.
Yes.
All right.
I actually, if it's okay, I'm going to start out with a question. Tony, I've seen your presentation before, but I don't think I've ever asked this question. With relation to the weir in the river, is there like a jurisdiction? Like, is it that the town line goes through the middle of the river? Like, who's in possession of the land that or the water, the river where the weir is? Is it in no man's land? Does someone have jurisdiction over it?
It would be a shared jurisdiction. In other words, the part that is now you're looking at it from the west, the west side is Paterson, and the east side would be Fairlawn. Coming down the middle of that river, you would have a north and south line. So it would be jurisdictional as far as that's concerned.
We do have a couple of typed questions. I'm going to go ahead and read. Martin would like to know, is the weir downstream of the Paterson Falls?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's interesting. He mentioned the Paterson Falls. We know that the Paterson Falls was the area was extremely active as far as fishing is concerned. And I have to investigate a little bit more closely, but it looks like there is a weir formation downstream about maybe 300 feet, 300 to 400 feet from the basin of the falls. So that remains to be studied.
Okay. All right, now Dolly has a question, so I'm gonna unmute her so she can go ahead and ask her question. Dolly, you're all set. You just got to unmute yourself.
Hear me?
Yes. we
Okay.
can.
Well, I found it very interesting. I'm fairly a newcomer. I live near Memorial School, and I have walked over to the river there, and the next time I go, I'll know what to look for.
Well, okay, Dolly. Now you have to go when the river is at low level, because the water level has prevented us for quite a while as far as
Okay.
doing any more. The extensive study that we did of the Paterson, Fairlawn Paterson fish was done in '98 when we had an extreme drought in this area of New Jersey. And it wasn't, such a beautiful thing for your lawn or your gardens, but as far as weir study was concerned, it was ideal. So wait for the water level to get lower.
Not many people know about the little path that goes back to the river over there, because I'm a newcomer to the area.
Oh,
I
okay.
find it all very interesting.
Well, it's called the nature path, you probably know.
It's
And there's at the beginning of the path, there is a plaque.
I noticed, but not many people venture back there.
Yeah, that plaque would have, I believe, my name or picture, and another gentleman, a former resident of Fair Lawn, Alan Luttens. And Alan and I collaborated on a report for the Archaeological Society on the fish weir.
All right, thank you very much, Dolly. So Martin had another question. He was wondering, could fish and eels get above the Paterson Great Falls?
Paterson of Great Falls? No,
Yeah, no.
no, but however, it's a good point. About 3.5 miles south of the weir, you'll find the Dundee Dam. The Dundee Dam is approximately 16 feet in height. And it's a beautiful, I mean, the construction is absolutely beautiful. It was built in the 1880s. But when that dam was built, the flow of the river upstream, anything going upstream, was impaired. Now, I was surprised. Here I am 3.5 miles north of that, and I'm cleaning the air. I go down to the river area every once in a while, you know, just to clean it, because sometimes rubbish gets caught in the rocks. But anyway, what do I find? A 2.5-foot dead eel. Now, I called the Fish and Game and I told him the situation. He said the instinct of the eel is so strong that a wall like the Dundee Dam, which is only about maybe 10 or 12 feet, its inclination in degrees, they could swim up that, slither up that, and do their spawning. Personally, I would like to see them build fish ladders on both sides. That would be. Now, a lot of that, the game fish that you saw, or like the rossback, or the rock bass, the pickerel, the shad, they're all coming back. They're all coming back because all of the factories have been shut down. And now that water is quite pure.
And Paul is wondering, Tony, if the Weir stones have been lost to vandalism. Has vandalism affected the Weir in any way?
No, not that I believe that any stones were taken. I can't say that for sure. But the thing is that although the access to the Weir very easily would be from Route 20, you're not allowed to park there. No parking. Now, I have a sign that was built for me by the River Restoration Group. So when I go there, I put that sign in my back window. And because one day I didn't have the sign up, you know, and I was down by the Weir. And then, you know, you get the feeling that somebody's looking at you, right? I look over my shoulder and there's a policeman up there, right, on the ridge. And here he is. He has his hand on his pistol. He says, "Could I help you?" And then I had to explain who I was and what I was doing. But he told me, he said, "Be sure you get that sign made up, because if we see that sign, we'll just pass it by."
Does the flooding of the river affect the Weir in any way, Tony? Does it dislodge the stones like when we have big floods like we just had for the 2 hurricanes?
No, incredibly, it doesn't. It doesn't. We thought that you see, Paterson is just south of Hawthorne, and there is what we call the Bend. And I'm getting a little bit of horn music behind me. Anyway, it's called the Bend. It's called Wagaraw. Wagaraw is the American Indian, the Lenape Indian word for bend in the river. And we feel that the current slows down somewhat. And that's about 2.5 miles from the Weir. Now, I didn't show you the picture, but about 16 feet from the Weir, there was an abandoned 16-foot fiberglass boat. And we had to have that pulled out. If that would have washed over the Weir, that could have damaged it. Probably came over the fall someplace.
Patricia's wondering if there is any printed material about the Weir.
Yes, we have a report that was submitted to the Archaeological Society. If she sends me an email, I can send her a copy of that report and other articles that have been written about that area. And yes, I'd be more than happy to.
And Dennis is wondering what you think the future of the Weir is.
Well, I believe we're trying to get it on the National Historic Register. And we have to apply again and to give the concrete proof that we have. And I mean, this Max Schrabish was a noted and very respected archaeologist, anthropologist in this city. And they did a report that was sponsored by the Museum of Natural History for the entire state of New Jersey to pinpoint as many Aboriginal sites as possible. And I read part of that about the glacial ridge. And he had a nice way of putting it, you know, an extremely talented writer, very prolific. There was a, just to the left of the Weir, there's a company called Sandoz, Tanis Sand and Gravel. Well, that's the name of the company today. But during Max's day, it was called the Hackensack Sand and Gravel. And he predicted, well, the reason why they picked that area for sand and gravel is because it was about the best type of sand and gravel that you can find in this area. And he said, the tooth of progress is going to take a 60-foot bite right down to the river, and it will be gone. And he was right. He was right. It's approximately 60 feet from the riverbank area to the top of River Road.
But Tony, being listed on the National Register, would that just, the advantage of that is simply that then there would be more available funds? I mean, the state's not gonna be able to police, you know, and actively protect the Weir, would just do more formal documentation, or like, what's the end hope with that?
Yeah, we hope that that would prevent any type of damage or vandalism to the Weir. Although the Weir, as to my knowledge, hasn't been vandalized as long as I've been working on that. That's it's been since 1998.
Okay.
I guess the rocks are too heavy to carry.
I had another question too, Tony, because we were talking about the dugout canoe. Would fishing in the Weir, they would be standing in the river, or would they sometimes be in their canoe fishing in the river? How would they utilize the Weir?
Well, would canoe up to the Weir, to the sluice area, and when they would have that sluice closed and the net going across the widest part, then could get out of their canoe. And there, of course, would always be one person to be sure the canoe isn't washed downstream, and they could actually spear the Weir. I mean,
Okay.
fish, yeah. But that was one of 6 methods.
Is that it for questions? If so, I'd like to thank Tony once again. I thank all of you for joining us this evening. Appreciate your questions. I do want to inform you of the Paterson Museum Foundation is beginning its history lecture series, which actually begins next week, November 23rd. It'll be the history of the Paterson Museum, which I'll be delivering myself from the Panama Canal to the Rogers Locomotive Works. It's going to cover over 100 years of the building of this institution. You can find out more information about that by emailing events@pattersonmuseumfoundation.org. Again, one more time, events@pattersonmuseumfoundation.org, or check us out on our Paterson Museum Facebook site, and you'll find the listing there where we can send you the link.